Good morning, everyone. The Subcommittee on Research and Technology will come to order. Good morning again. Welcome to today's hearing entitled Examining Federal Advanced Manufacturing Programs. In front of you are packets containing the written testimony, biographies, and truth and testimony disclosures for today's witnesses. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's hearing where we will examine federal advanced manufacturing programs, including research and development programs at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, and review H.R. 1421, the Advancing Innovative Manufacturing Act of 2013, sponsored by the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Bernice Johnson. Manufacturing plays a critical role in American economic competitiveness. Manufacturing represents approximately 11% of the American economy, and manufacturing output has risen by 13% over the last several years. Manufacturing also has the greatest multiplier effect of any major sector of the American economy, and nearly 60% of all U.S. exports are in manufactured goods. While there are areas in decline in American manufacturing, such as labor-intensive, low-skilled manufacturing activities, there are also significant opportunities of growth in knowledge and technology-intensive advanced manufacturing. For example, the semiconductor industry boasts nearly 250,000 high-paying direct jobs in the U.S. alone, while supporting an additional 1 million jobs indirectly. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, or PCAST, defines advanced manufacturing as a family of activities that A, depend on the use and coordination of information, automation, computation, software, sensing, and networking, and or B, make use of cutting-edge materials and emerging capabilities enabled by the physical and biological sciences. With a technical knowledge base supported by our excellent universities and research institutes, and with innovative leadership supported by our private industries, both large and small, the U.S. has the opportunity to lead the world in advanced manufacturing competitiveness. However, it is incumbent upon us as policymakers to create an environment that will enable American advanced manufacturing to thrive. Unfortunately, I'm concerned that we have not lived up to our end of the bargain. While all of our major global competitors have been lowering their corporate tax rates, ours is essentially unchanged for the past 20 years. Rising costs in healthcare, regulatory compliance, and energy all discourage manufacturing from thriving domestically. And uncertainty about our future debt inhibits private sector investment in future growth. It is critical that we focus on the policies that will make America the most competitive country in the world to start or grow a business. Given our current budget crisis, it is crucial that we maximize our investments to ensure the greatest return for our hard-working taxpayers' dollars. We cannot continue to spend endless amounts of borrowed money to create programs or sustain programs without making cuts elsewhere. Prioritization is crucial. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses' thoughts on measurement science conducted at the NIST laboratories, the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Consortium Program, and the administration's proposal for the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation. We also look forward to hearing our witnesses' thoughts on the ranking member's bill and about improvements and prioritization that can be made to our federal advanced manufacturing R&D programs. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. At this point, I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Illinois, for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling this hearing to examine federal advanced manufacturing programs and the legislation introduced by the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Johnson. I can't think of a better way to start out our post-break session here. I'd also like to thank the witnesses for being here today. Look forward to your testimony. Today's hearing is an important follow-up to the hearing we held in July on my bipartisan American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act. I'm glad that we are taking an in-depth look at these issues as we seek to identify the best federal policies that will facilitate the growth of manufacturing and job creation. Despite all the attention being focused on other important issues right now, the American people are still focused on the fact that more must be done to encourage the creation of good-paying jobs in our country. A vibrant manufacturing sector is critical for America's economic growth and success of the middle class. Unfortunately, since the 1970s, we have seen a less vibrant manufacturing sector, with the number of manufacturing jobs shrinking from 20 million in 1979 to fewer than 12 million today. The recent recession hit workers in the manufacturing sector especially hard and contributed to the stagnation of middle-class wages. In addition, our trade deficit in advanced technology products is growing, and China is now the world's biggest exporter of high-tech goods. But there has been some good news recently, with American manufacturing showing signs of a comeback. In fact, a report last week by the Institute for Supply Management found that economic activity in the manufacturing sector expanded for the third consecutive month. Despite these positive signs, significant challenges do remain. Our position as a global leader in technology is being threatened as developing countries build up their capabilities to become not only the world's assembly line, but also the creator of new and innovative technologies. They're investing heavily in manufacturing and innovation, and they're doing so in a much more comprehensive way than the United States. Right now, the federal government has countless departments, agencies, programs, and policies that affect manufacturing, from our tax code and energy policies to programs related to research and development in education and workforce. But these efforts are not well coordinated, to say the least. Through legislation I introduced earlier this year, an interagency committee would conduct a comprehensive analysis of the U.S. manufacturing sector, examining the impact that government policies are having on manufacturing and how we can be more efficient and effective. By improving the coordination of various government agencies and, more importantly, coordination with the private sector, we can develop concrete goals and objectives and implement policies that create the best condition for American manufacturers to thrive. Today, we're going to focus largely on the advanced manufacturing activities of NIST and the programs and activities proposed in H.R. 1421. Although NIST is a relatively small agency, it is an extremely important player in federal efforts to spur manufacturing, innovation, and economic prosperity. For more than 100 years, NIST has supported the competitiveness of U.S. industry by advancing measurement science, standards, and technology. Their work in biomanufacturing, nanomanufacturing, and smart manufacturing will provide the foundation for future U.S. market growth, competitiveness, and the creation and retention of high-skill, well-paying jobs. Furthermore, NIST's broad and deep technical expertise, as well as the ability to serve as a bridge to U.S. businesses, is unparalleled. This connection in industry is essential, and I strongly believe we cannot move American manufacturing forward without building more bridges between the public and private sectors. H.R. 1421 encourages the formation of public-private partnerships and the development of technology roadmaps to address the research needs of industry. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about how the federal government can help promote deep and long-lasting public-private sector collaboration in manufacturing. I'm also interested in learning more about how the federal government can help our small and medium-sized manufacturers become more competitive in the global marketplace. Mr. Chairman, we must adopt smart policies that encourage innovation, entrepreneurship, efficiency, and investment in American manufacturing. American manufacturing equals American jobs and a strong economy. And we simply can't afford to lose our capacity to manufacture the breakthrough technologies and products of tomorrow. I look forward to working with you to advance legislation on this important topic. Thank you again for holding this hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Johnson, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here to review the current federal efforts in advancing manufacturing, as well as to examine legislation that I've introduced to help ensure our manufacturing sector remains competitive and continues to create jobs over the long term. Some of you may not know, but my hometown, Dallas, Texas, is the 6th largest metropolitan economy in the United States, and according to the Brookings Institute, the 12th largest in the world. I mention this only because one of Dallas's strengths is in manufacturing, in its manufacturing sector. About 250,000 people were employed in a manufacturing job in 2010, and 1/3 of these jobs were in the high technology area. These figures show that the Dallas region has the potential to become the hub for manufacturing for years to come, but it is by no means guaranteed. While the United States is struggling to sustain its leadership, other countries are focusing their full attention on promoting manufacturing and innovation. They are aggressively investing in research and development and shaping their policies and programs to change the competitive landscape in their favor. We simply cannot afford to stand by idly and watch our competitors position themselves to move ahead of us. We need our manufacturing sector to be the most sophisticated in the world, using the largest technologies and the newest and the most efficient methods and processes. That is why I introduced the Advancing Innovative Manufacturing, or the AIM Act, which can help ensure the survival of our manufacturing sector and our global leadership by making strategic investments in manufacturing research, development, and education. First, the AIM Act brings the public and private sectors together to develop research roadmaps and share the cost of conducting the research contained in these roadmaps. It does this by formally authorizing NIST's Advanced Manufacturing Technology Consortia program at a level that will allow the program to fully accomplish its mission of addressing the pre-competitive challenges of American industry faces today. Next, the AIM Act focuses on a key segment of our society, the small and medium-sized manufacturer. These small businesses drive job growth, but they often lack the technical expertise and capacity needed to transform an innovative idea into a new product or service. My bill creates a pilot program that will provide small and medium-sized manufacturers with vouchers that will allow them to buy R&D or innovation expertise as needed. Innovation voucher programs have been deployed in more than a dozen countries with encouraging results. For example, a study found that 8 out of 10 vouchers issued by the Holland government resulted in an innovative product that would not have otherwise been realized. Finally, and maybe most importantly, the AIM Act addresses our workforce needs by providing community colleges with grants that will allow them to prepare our students for the manufacturing jobs of the future. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to end by quoting from a comprehensive National Academies report from last year that I think clearly summarizes where we stand. The United States, while retaining the vestiges of its leadership position, should recognize that merely maintaining the current policies and programs will lead to continued erosion of our economic capabilities, especially in the high technology industries that are the basis of future prosperity. Mr. Chairman, we need to be bold and invest in our future. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on ways to improve the AIM Act and what policies and programs should be implemented now to build a productive and job-creating 21st century economy. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. At this time, I'd like to submit the statement of Chairman Smith into the record. If there are no other members who wish to submit additional opening statements, if there are additional members, your statements will be added to the record at this point. This time, I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Alan Taub, Professor of Material Science and Engineering at the University of Michigan. Dr. Taub previously served as Vice President of Global Research and Development at General Motors Corporation and currently chairs the NIST Visiting Committee on Advanced Technology. Dr. Taub received his bachelor's degree in materials engineering from Brown University and his master's and PhD degrees in applied physics from Harvard. Our second witness is Dr. Thomas Baer, Executive Director of the Stanford Photonics Research Center and a consulting professor at the Applied Physics Department at Stanford University. Dr. Baer has been extensively involved in startup companies in the Silicon Valley and was formerly a member of the NIST Visiting Committee on Advanced Technology. Dr. Baer received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in physics from the Lawrence University and a PhD in atomic physics from the University of Chicago. Our third witness is Dr. Mark Muir, Senior Fellow and the Director of Policy at the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institute. He previously led the development of a state advanced industries strategy for Colorado and is currently leading the development of a strategy for Tennessee's advanced auto industry. Dr. Muir received a Bachelor of Arts from Harvard University and a Master's of American Studies from the University of California, Berkeley. Thanks again for our really very distinguished panel for being here. As our witnesses should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes, after which the members of the committee will each have 5 minutes to ask questions. I now recognize Dr. Taub for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ranking members Lipinski and Johnson, and other members of the committee. As a newly minted academic, in my class at the university, I teach 2 key rules in manufacturing. First, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manufacture it with quality and reliability. And second, if you don't have standards in place, you'll be hindered in widespread commercialization. For over a century, the measurement services and standard programs of NIST have ensured the accuracy and reliability of nearly every measurement in this country. We tend to take for granted our ability to perform even the most basic measurements, such as length and weight. The reality is, the NIST services provide the measurement standards that allow industry to use products efficiently throughout the entire supply chain with reliability. It's important to recognize that NIST's ability to successfully deliver high-quality measurement services to the nation's industry is grounded in their world-class measurement science capability. What might appear to the non-expert as fundamental research without application is actually the foundational core that allows NIST to deliver state-of-the-art tools to its industrial partners. NIST is also participating with other federal agencies to launch the new Advanced Manufacturing Initiative that will help bridge the gap from basic research to product implementation. These programs will enable the federal government to catalyze the integration of efforts across the national laboratories, universities, and industry so that we will have access to advanced manufacturing technology. The AmTech Consortia, described in Section 2 of H.R. 1421, together with the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation Institutes, will create, and this is important, industry-driven roadmaps that will then target joint investment in pre-competitive advanced manufacturing research. It's important that these programs remain industry-driven and that they're fully integrated and coordinated. Equally important is that creating these institutes gets accelerated and we overcome the present funding constraints. H.R. 1421 also includes an innovation voucher pilot program. This program is a novel approach and it will enable small and medium companies to access leading-edge technology at universities and national laboratories that today they have a barrier to access. However, given the size of each voucher, it's critical that the program be streamlined in its administration so that the overhead is minimized. I think the Secretary should consider incorporating the pilot within an existing outreach organization such as the MEPs, which have a long history of serving small and medium companies. As our manufacturing processes become ever more sophisticated, The reality is companies are finding it increasingly difficult to access a workforce trained with 21st century manufacturing skills. As described in Section 5 of H.R. 1421, the efforts need to be inclusive of community colleges, advanced manufacturing certification programs, private sector partnerships, and other activities. In those technology areas, which will be covered by the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation, the institutes can serve as the focal point for those programs. Given our present hard economic times, we clearly need to focus on making good investments that will have the greatest payoffs. It is, in fact, global competition that requires us to make these investments in measurement and standards, advanced manufacturing technology, small company outreach and workforce development, so that our domestic manufacturing enterprise will remain globally competitive. I suggest that upon study, a highly positive return on this investment in the key manufacturing pillars will be found as measured in manufacturing jobs and balance of trade. The support is needed in a number of parallel complementary activities that taken together will maintain the world's most efficient and innovative manufacturing ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Dr. Baer for his testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Bouchon, ranking members Johnson and Lipinski, and members of the Subcommittee on Science, Space, and Technology. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about the importance of advanced manufacturing to the United States government and U.S. citizens. Although my early training in scientific research was in physics, I have spent most of my career working in the private sector in the fields of biotechnology and biomedicine. I've been a founder and senior manager of several high-technology companies in Silicon Valley, where advanced manufacturing was a critical corporate focus. In my opinion, it is not an exaggeration to state that manufacturing has been the foundation of the economy of the United States for the past 150 years. The technology behind the cotton gin, the steam locomotive, electric lighting, the airplane, the automobile, the transistor, the laser, television, liquid crystal displays, and the internet were primarily invented in the U.S. and first introduced commercially here by developing advanced manufacturing technologies domestically. Moreover, we have emerged victorious from several worldwide conflicts in large part due to our manufacturing expertise. However, this is not a prowess that we should take for granted. The United States has the largest number of world-class research universities, the best government laboratories, and the highest level of private sector entrepreneurial activity and technological innovation in the world. However, other nations are doing more than the U.S. to encourage interaction between these three sectors, providing effective programs that directly incentivize collaboration focusing on developing advanced manufacturing technologies. I'm very pleased to see that the U.S. government is taking action to develop comparable programs, and I encourage you to give these programs the highest priority possible. I recommend that special attention be paid to funding newer industries where high growth is expected. Often, companies participating in these industries are in their initial growth phases and lack the financial resources to explore new manufacturing methods. Examples of such industries are renewable energy generation through solar power, solid-state lighting, efficient and lighter weight batteries for electric vehicles, expanding our information technology bandwidth through silicon photonics. The internet bandwidth demands are increasing at 60% per year. That means a factor of 10-fold increase in demand over the next decade. And we presently do not have the technology to service that demand. It needs to be developed. Advanced manufacturing will play a key role in that area. Another area of growth is developing new transformative manufacturing methods in the fields of protein engineering and synthetic biology. Over the next decade, these nascent industries are expected to add hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy and thousands of new jobs. It is in industries such as these that government programs can provide great benefit and a large return on investment to U.S. citizens. These new programs in advanced manufacturing will also provide great opportunities for progress in basic science. Invention and innovation often precede and stimulate new science. The steam engine was invented and optimized prior to the development of the basic theory of thermodynamics that describe its operation. The electric light bulb was demonstrated and developed prior to the theory of black body radiation, and it was due to the inability of classical theories to describe radiation from a light bulb accurately, which led to current-day modern quantum theories in physics. High-temperature superconductors were discovered 30 years ago, and physicists are still debating different theories describing their operation. The laser, the transistor, satellite communications are all further examples of technologies that were incompletely understood when they were first demonstrated, and the ensuing exploration of their operation and the development of advanced manufacturing processes led to many scientific advances. The discovery research that will be a necessary component of programs in advanced manufacturing will be important, challenging, and transformative. The National Institute for Standards and Technology has the appropriate historical mission, a very experienced and talented management staff, and superb facilities. It is the logical choice to lead the advanced manufacturing initiatives. Thank you again for this opportunity to discuss these initiatives with you today, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Muir for his testimony.
Good morning, Chairman, Ranking Members Lipinski and Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. Very much appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. What I thought I would do, since we've had some very capable examinations of what NIST can do and the direction of its work, I'm going to close the testimonies by turning to some fundamental rationales so we remember what we are doing here. So I first want to consider why manufacturing actually matters so much, why federal policy support is warranted, and then what that might look like. And I'll touch at the very end on a few comments on HR 1422. Let's consider first, why manufacturing matters. And on this front, I'm going to be very brief, but I'm going to put it in a broader economic context. And I think my group, since about 2008, has been arguing very much against the view that there's nothing special about manufacturing, which only 4 or 5 years ago really was a frequent refrain. And motivated by the view, though, that since the 2008 crash, we needed to rebalance the American economy away from consumption and imports financed by foreign borrowing and back towards creating real value through innovation, export, and outcompeting other nations. So we've argued that manufacturing certainly matters, not just for the 11.5 million jobs left in the sector, but equally importantly because it's a major source of technology innovation and because it can make a major contribution to reducing the nation's trade deficit. Manufacturing, it's only about 11% or so of GDP, but it's responsible for the overwhelming majority, about 68% of it, of domestic R&D spending by companies. This is the main site of innovation and technology innovation in the private sector and in the whole economy. At the same time, we've noted that manufacturing exports are going to be essential if we're going to reduce the trade deficit. It's theoretically possible to eliminate the trade deficit by increasing export and reducing the import of services, agriculture products, and natural resources, but the task would be much easier if manufacturing were included. So if we want to reduce the deficit, the trade deficit, we need to bear down on manufacturing. Let's return to whether or not manufacturing is an appropriate object of policy attention. I'll just say there are sound economic reasons for engagement beyond the simple values of manufacturing that we've heard about from my co-panelists. To many economists, perhaps many of you here today, there's the sense that any type of preferential treatment for a single type of investment is off base or distortionary. However, it's essential to remember that standard economic theory justifies government action where there are market failures, meaning situations where the societal benefits or positive spillovers of an activity exceed the private return. In those situations, it's unlikely that a private business will invest at the optimal level. Hence my view. The U.S. manufacturing sector is plagued by a number of market failures that merit government attention. Here are a few of these that pertain to this morning's discussion of H.R. 1421. Manufacturers underinvest in collaborative public-private road mapping exercises because the collaborations are hard to organize and because they can rarely reap the full value of the association in their individual bottom lines. Manufacturers, even small ones, also underinvest in R&D because they can't reap the full value of technical advances in their profits. It's a classic example of positive spillovers. And then finally, mapping again into aspects of the bill, manufacturers, especially small ones, often lag in identifying or adopting or developing the latest training and education models. The inability of firms to capture all the benefits, again, means they're producing value for the economy, value for the society, but not always profits to themselves. So in each of these instances, the implication is clear. Fundamental market values ensure the nation will underinvest. So what kind of policy actions make sense? It's important to note that manufacturing policy should not pick winners, and it should improve the overall macro environment, but it also needs to attack these market failures. So some of the general aspects, and I think I'm running over just a little bit, increase public investment in R&D, improve the nation's tax competitiveness, especially for R&D and capital equipment, foster trade, invest in the nation's STEM workforce, modernize infrastructure, safeguard the nation's energy windfall of unconventional natural gas. But then policies that attack these particular market problems can be very helpful, and I think that's what this bill does quite skillfully. We like the idea of challenge grants that catalyze that make available a grant, but catalyze the partnerships between sectors, business, academia, and national labs. And I think you have a number of those in this. I could talk some more about some of the other aspects of the bill, but I think the fundamental use of competitive grants here is a very important model for engaging industry and getting them out front in determining and shaping the interventions. So I can go on later in questions, but that's the basic outline. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony and all of your testimony. This is a fascinating subject to me, and I think American competitiveness is really needs to be on the forefront of everything we talk about in Washington. I think driving the private sector economy, especially at a time right now when many of our fellow citizens are unemployed or are not employable in the high-tech industry because of the lack of skills training and other things that they need to improve on. And we can be helpful if we put the right policy in place. So thanks for your testimony. I'll remind the members that the committee rules limit questioning to 5 minutes. The chair at this point, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes to begin questioning. This will be a little off script here, but if there's one or two things that we could do that would make us more competitive, short answer, what can we do in Washington to make us more competitive? Dr. Taub?
Yeah, well, I'll stick to the technology aspect of it rather than go into taxes and other incentives. I think in the area of manufacturing, the proposals on the table, whether it's fully funding the NNMI program or the AmTech parallel program, there have been a number of workshops that were done, and here's the key, with industry to help define how those programs could be done. The President's executive order has allowed the launch of 3 of those, but the target was to create 15. And I think the industries have defined what's needed, so I would suggest you fund the NNMI and AmTech work. Dr.
Baer? Following along that line, I think establishing programs like the NNMI, like the Bill 1421, to promote collaboration between the research universities and the private sector is excellent. It has the advantage of a very cost-effective way to supplement the R&D and advanced manufacturing, but it also provides incentive for training our students and workforce to solve problems that are relevant to U.S. industry.
I would agree with each of these, and I'll provide a slightly different reason. The manufacturing institutes, the investing in manufacturing communities legislation and the HR 1421 all can help catalyze the kind of technological exchange, the multi-sectoral engagements of consortia at the regional level, and we think that that is extremely important. The economy is not everywhere. It's in particular places, these intense clusters of technological exchange. So I think we have many of the pieces of architecture on the table, but the more it can be tuned to what's happening in Dallas, what's happening in Wichita, and using to get that bottom-up sense of innovation in the economy is important, and I think that is implied in a lot of the things that are on the table.
Okay. Dr. Baer, I'm going to ask, the 2012 VCAT annual report recommends that NIST provide more clarity and depth in strategic planning. What recommendations would you have to establish this goal at NIST? And what would be an effective way to provide the planning across both the laboratory research programs and the extramural programs?
I served on the VCAT and overlapped with Dr. Taub, and I think one of the most important roles of the VCAT was to provide a ongoing emphasis on strategic planning and to help to guide that process. I think the contributions from the VCAT committee members to provide strategies for putting in place a strategic plan, which were very honestly not part of the culture at NIST, were quite important. So I think one of the ways that NIST could do this effectively is to involve the VCAT members and provide input to the senior management there in the strategic planning process. Maybe Alan has some comments as well.
Yeah, Dr. Taub.
Well, I've served on the VCAT since 2008, and I now am the chair. I would say probably the best thing NIST did was appoint Pat Gallagher as the undersecretary. He embraced strategic planning, which, as Dr. Baer points out, it was really getting in the way of what was a bottoms-up work, and he was allowed to restructure the organization. He clearly delineated the extramural and the laboratory programs, and now at the beginning of every VCAT meeting, in fact, they review their updated strategic plan. So I'm pretty sure in the 2013 report you won't see that comment after 7 years of it showing up.
Thank you. And then I'll ask Dr. Muir this question. Given the broad range of policy proposals being considered, how can we determine what's giving us our best return on investment?
I mean, I think any and all of these programs ought to be, provided with standard and state-of-the-art performance management. Data collection is essential. It pervades the kind of advanced economies you're concerned with. So I think it is not a difficult matter to work out some basic performance management that actually should be taken seriously. I mean, I think we're agreed that straight grants without a performance content and the ability to sunset some grants and scale up those that are high performers is critical, and that will require careful data collection and advanced set standard frameworks.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you. I want to start with a question on international competitiveness. In his testimony, Dr. Baer mentions that other nations appear to be encouraging more interaction between their respective universities, industries, government laboratories in an effort to promote manufacturing. So I wanted to ask all of you about any insight you have into successful programs or models being pursued in other countries that we might want to consider implementing here in the United States. So we'll start with Dr. Taub.
Well, a very good example has been the Fraunhofer Institutes that started in Germany, and I think many of the principles of the Fraunhofers were built into the NNMI and AMTech constructs. It's also a question of, in my experience in other countries, there's a more sustained strategic objective for their government funding. They tend to go with a longer time frame horizon, which allows the universities to really build the core competency, to build the relationship with their industrial partners, so that you can go in and more effectively work over a longer time frame. You know, funding a strategic program in a deep technology for 2 years just doesn't cut it anymore. They tend to go with 5- and 10-year plans quite effectively.
Thank you. Dr. Baer?
I recently was president of an international scientific society, the Optical Society of America, and I traveled all over the world, met with leading scientific groups and also ministers of science in a number of countries, Japan, China, Taiwan, Germany, and Brazil. And all of these countries had programs, I think, which conveyed the message to our universities of the importance of a focus on applied research and manufacturing. And that's almost as important as anything you structure into a bill, is just raising the awareness of the contribution that the university sector can make to industrial competitiveness in the U.S. We have long emphasized here the importance of basic research and scientific research in general. We have not done as well as we could just valuing the contributions that can be made to advanced manufacturing. Putting in place these programs, incentivizing them through competitive grants and matching grants, I think will just change the attitude and culture. My institution, Stanford University, is one of the best in the United States at recognizing the value of applied research and a strong interface to local industry around Silicon Valley as well as worldwide. And I think this will be a remarkable change that will take place if these bills are funded and the funds made accessible to the universities.
Well, I just have to add, Dr. Baer, I'm very proud to be an alum of Stanford. So. Mr. Muir.
And I would, very much in the spirit of these comments, note that I think our country lacks the sense of a national strategy in the area. There isn't a clear direction or even to an extent a significant stressing of the importance of this. There's a lack of industry road mapping, which I think your bill is beginning to try to take on. So these things would give a context for individual, more pointillistic efforts such as the NNMI. And then meanwhile, our country hasn't, until very recently, thought so much about the subnational nature of the innovation economy, and it hasn't thought so much about the applied aspects. So I think a stronger focus on, regional policy is a part of innovation. And we think, again, that federal challenge grants to regions are a great way to prompt the kind of collaboration that will generate information exchange and innovation.
Well, I have very little time left, but let's see if we can do very quickly. Any suggestions specifically on improving technology transfer, which I think is one of the most important things that I've focused on since I've been here. We do have great research at our universities, our national labs. How do we improve technology transfer to manufacturing? Who wants to jump in? Dr. Baer?
I think I will use my institution, Stanford, as an example. The goal of technology transfer is not to earn money for the university through licensing, but rather to promote the commercialization of technology that's been co-developed or developed at Stanford University. That attitude, where you use the licensing process as a route to commercialization, and that being the goal. And I will tell you that our university reaps the benefits more than tenfold by just generous contributions to the university supporting research and development, and also contributions to the endowment from grateful alums and grateful companies, more than 10 times the return they get from their licensing processes. So that attitude change, I think, is something that will promote the technology transfer and facilitate it between the universities and the commercial sector.
If I could just build on that for 30 seconds. I spent my 30 years in industry working quite closely with universities in this country and around the world. Getting the statement of work between the university professor and the industrial researcher is normally a 2-day exercise. Working through the intellectual property arrangement can take months. Yes. And it's this whole question of the federal investment leading to the invention, leading to the intellectual property. How is the university going to benefit from that? It slows down and in many cases stops progress.
To add one note, I think one of the weaknesses of our tech transfer activities is they don't work particularly well for SMEs. The whole structure, the whole licensing process, and this applies in spades to the national laboratories, is oriented towards much larger companies. And I think, the voucher is an interesting way to try to start a more kind of anarchic and maybe productive set of relationships with smaller firms. But I think that's an area that is important to look at, and I think it's excellent that the bill is going to have an experiment with vouchers.
Thank you.
I can now recognize Mr. Collins for his questioning.
Thank you, Chairman. I've spent my life in manufacturing, and some of it advanced manufacturing. I've got a LEED certified manufacturing plant, ISO 9000 or 13485, and certainly have Lean Six Sigma alive and well in all my companies. And what I'd point out is all of that came through public-private partnerships with the universities. State University of New York at Buffalo, the Center for Industrial Effectiveness, the RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, their Center of Excellence in Sustainable Manufacturing. And as a small company, without their knowledge and their assistance, I think it's safe to say as a small company, we would not have had the resources. So, in some cases, we're talking about motherhood and apple pie here, what do we want to say, the 6-to-1 job creating add-on for every manufacturing job. There's 6 others. Anything we can do to assist small businesses who are always cash restrained. So just quickly, if you could comment on your experience with the small companies and in this case, use of government funding in supporting these institutions of higher education, and then helping these smaller companies implement these critical strategies for their success. Dr. Traub or Dr. Baer?
Well, having spent my career in 3 Fortune 10 companies, I'm now on the board of small companies, beginning to learn that world. I actually don't believe the agenda for the small companies and the large companies is that different. The small companies enter the supply chain, right? They become an integral part of an industrial sector. I think part of the issue of small companies accessing the universities and national labs is it's cumbersome. I mean, the companies I was in, we had an office. I had a director that, would spend their time opening the doors and seeking out these things. So there has been talk about making the capabilities of the universities and the national labs more available. Just who do you go to? With all today's modern IT technology, how do you go there? And then I am very intrigued by this voucher program. At $20,000 to $30,000 per grant, you can get a good start. But let's not do it so it becomes $40,000 of overhead and a full-time person at every small company to get in there. By the way, I've also supported work at RIT's institute.
Thank you.
Well, in contrast to Alan, I've spent most of my time with small startup companies and within Silicon Valley, and had very constructive interaction with some universities. I think the University of Rochester, RIT, and the state of New York actually does an excellent job of supporting SMEs and growing them. And I think a lot of it is, again, just attitude, lowering the barriers, encouraging the interaction between the university sector and the private sector, and streamlining the intellectual property process. I think it's very possible for SMEs to interact with universities constructively. I've also had some very disappointing interactions where the expectations were just out of line. And I go back to the idea that the universities, particularly the smaller universities, often look to the licensing process to generate revenue. And it's just not a very realistic way to approach that. Incentivizing them through government contracts and government programs like the voucher program, to participate with the industry without looking to the licensing process could be a key element.
And I would add the use of the challenge grant is a way to require, really, the participation of the whole full panoply of types of firms. I would suggest that where you have a stipulation for a particular consortia, that it includes some provision for SME participation, which many firms want, given that they're part of their supply chain in the first place. So I think you're on the right track with the challenge consortium model, but it ought to be explicit that SME ought to be part of it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think from our experience, without some level of this kind of support, the small companies, as much as they would like to do something, they don't have the resources. And in most cases, certainly up in our part of the world, it's generally a 50-50 split between the small business and the university, and it's just what we need to jumpstart some of these initiatives. My time's expired, so I yield back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll pass because I enjoy what I'm hearing, and I don't want to mess it up. Thank you.
All right. I should stay on their side. Mr. Barra, is he here? Nope. Ms. Esty, you're next.
Thank you very much, and I too am enjoying this. I hail from Connecticut, where this is core to what we do, both with large and small manufacturers, but particularly small manufacturers. So there are a couple of points I wanted to follow up on, and probably start with you, Mr. Moreau. Both on vouchers, which we've been talking about. Connecticut is one of those states that with the Connecticut Next program, we are test driving vouchers. So I know you know a little bit something about that, and if you could share with us what other states are doing around vouchers, what's been the experience so far, what could we learn and incorporate into our legislation to make it more effective? That's question number one. Question number two, which a number of you have touched on, is this important of regionalization? It's something we're looking to do in Connecticut and in New England on our sectors, both on biotech, biomed, and manufacturing. I'm increasingly of the view that that interaction between universities, small companies, and large companies, and our technical high schools, which we haven't even mentioned, and our community colleges, to create an ecosystem for this innovation. So if you could talk about that importance of having them really in fairly tight proximity and what we could look for, and what role the federal government might play in facilitating those regional hubs without picking winners and losers, which I know we're all very concerned about, and yet if you don't have a critical mass, you're not going to get those synergies, which frankly the cotton gin came from Connecticut. It was those synergies and water power that helped develop our first industrial revolution. Thank you.
First, I'll note that the major experiments with vouchers have been European to date. You in Iowa are the new experiments in this country, so there's not a lot of U.S. experience to fall back on. We think it is a deeply American solution. We should have piloted and invented this rather than our European competitors, because it respects the anarchic aspect, the organic aspect, and the fast-moving aspect of this kind of technology exchange that needs to occur. I would stress simplicity, quickness. They are a fast. They should be a fast, direct way of getting support to SMEs, and the administration has to be kept lean and simple. And we know that to some extent federal administration doesn't inherently lean that way. So I think but I think it's an important experiment. I would just say the ecosystem side, this discussion has really blossomed in the last 5 years, and I think I think the literature is increasingly confirming that there are innovation and entrepreneurship benefits to density, and I would stress a couple aspects. I don't think we should think in terms of inventing clusters or creating them. They are an organic fact of how the economy works. So we should acknowledge that they exist and then have policy flow behind that. So I think, again, bottom-up challenges to regions to propose great cluster initiatives and provide the performance management is the way to do this. And I think, we've seen across EDA, across the Department of Commerce, NSF as well. We've seen more and more interest in these challenges to bottom-up regions. So I think we shouldn't really think of moving firms around. We shouldn't think of creating density, but we should think of respecting it and suggesting it's a value. So thanks a lot. Yeah.
I believe clusters and a regional emphasis is absolutely critical. I come from arguably the largest innovation cluster in the world in Silicon Valley, and I can encourage my students to join a startup and take a risk, because if it does not succeed, there are many other opportunities. The forces of creative destruction are no more evident than in Silicon Valley. The clusters don't occur spontaneously. I think they do need a seed in which they can grow, and I think the government can provide that seed funding. But what is critical is that there be opportunities so that students and employees can take that risk and join small companies that just have a different risk profile than some of the larger companies. So clusters and regional emphasis, I think, are critical.
Yeah, quickly, it's always been intriguing to me that we're in an age of virtual co-location. Every company I had, we had 10, 20 engineering and R&D sites around the world, all communicating in webcast. But if you peel that onion, and I think we all believed, okay, we will have the best people, individuals sitting around the world, somehow merging into this coherent entity. And I think that dream did not materialize because we still need some physical presence. And so I think the key to it, and this was part of what came out in the NNMI workshops, have a regional flavor in terms of what you want the proposal to be. But do not pick the technology. Do not pick the industry. Distribute them, let them have national impact, regional flavor, but let the particular technology and industry self-assemble. I think the clusters are ready to form.
Mr. Holgren, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here too. Appreciate your time and your testimony. For me, there is no question that advanced manufacturing is the way our manufacturing base will continue moving, and our skills in this area are absolutely needed to maintain American competitiveness here and also abroad. The easiest way to ensure that American jobs stay here is by having advanced facilities that cannot yet be replicated elsewhere. That being said, it is our job as policymakers to plan for this in a fiscally responsible way while also taking into consideration the countless factors that are forcing businesses to move elsewhere or never even begin as a startup here in the United States. First question, Dr. Taub and also Dr. Baer. In your testimony, you discussed the value of both the NIST labs and the NIST extramural programs provided to American manufacturers. Given our current budget climate, it's difficult to envision significant increases to certain programs without corresponding cuts elsewhere. I wondered if you could address how you would assess the current allocation of funding for NIST programs between intramural research and extramural programs, and as we look to reauthorize the Institute, should we be looking to rebalance this allocation?
Well, I think in the past several years, the growth at NIST has been more around the extramural activities, building off their strong laboratories. But at the same time, the reason and the value of the extramural activities being under the same umbrella as the laboratories is relatively unique among the agencies. Normally, the Washington office is handling that, and the labs, if you look at the agencies, don't co-locate. So saying that the trade-off should be between those two, I'm not sure is the right way to think about it. I believe you need to go up to the larger R&D investment that the federal government makes and give a true look at how much of that pie is going to advanced manufacturing, whether it's at NSF, whether it's at DOE, whether it's at Commerce. The question is, which federal investment in technology is going to lead to jobs and is going to lead to economic well-being rather than the trade-off within NIST?
Dr. Baer?
You know, I challenge this distinction between intramural and extramural funding and saying that it's a balancing act. As an example, I've been involved with a program at Stanford with NIST called the Advances in Biomedical Measurement Science, which has a distinct advanced manufacturing component associated with it. We now have 6 NIST people located on Stanford campus, part of the intramural funding that they get, interfacing with local biotechnology companies in Silicon Valley. And the proximity, as Alan mentioned, is absolutely critical. And this program sort of combines the best of intramural and extramural funding. And it was conceived of by Willie May, the Associate Director of Laboratories at NIST, and I think is a tremendous example of how NIST needs to diffuse its borders with U.S. industry. And so this idea that somehow we have to judge and decide between intramural and extramural is something I think we should question, because I think allowing NIST management the freedom to utilize the resources along this way, given the excellent quality, as Alan has mentioned, of the leadership there right now, it will result in the optimal use of their total resources.
I think that's helpful. My passion still is making sure we're doing what no one else can do.
Yes.
And so that's that question of figuring that out. You know, what can industry do? What do we have to do? And figuring that out. Let me switch gears a little bit. Mr. Muir, wanted to, in your testimony, you discuss how community colleges remain seriously divorced from the industry needs, and that advanced manufacturing education grants could help close this gap. Personally, I am very interested in this. I've got 7 great community colleges in my district, but really interested and concerned and passionate about changing this disconnect between community colleges and industry. Wonder what other recommendations you might have to bridge the needs of these two stakeholders.
I mean, I do think that this is one of the crucial challenges we face if we're going to have a sustainable manufacturing renaissance. We are not in a position presently to fully staff it. I think the fundamental problem is that we've had a disconnect between a whole series of economic development initiatives and then another series of education and training activities that have really grown quite, they've developed their own cultures. They are really quite separate from each other. So I think it's going to take some stressing of the system through, I think, these kinds of challenge grants that are going to, compel or call out the kind of interactions that need to happen. Because I think, in general, we find that industry is not informing these reforms significantly. Meanwhile, community colleges are erratic in their ability to reach out. Some of them are developing extremely powerful programs. Many are trapped in inertia. So I think that these kind of challenges and competitive offerings are one way to begin to force the kind of collaboration that's needed.
Well, again, I appreciate you all being here. My time has expired, but this is an interesting conversation and one I hope we can continue. I have some questions I wasn't able to get to, so I would ask if you're okay with that, if we can follow up with some questions and further dialogue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Yeah, and you can submit those, and they'll get written answers. Recognize Ms. Kelly.
Thank you so much for being here. As many of my colleagues know, in many of our districts, and mine too, that our companies are saying they can't find enough skilled workers. And for me, I represent the south side of Chicago all the way to Kankakee County. And from the Ford plant to BASF, they've said the same thing. We've started a STEM council, and in the STEM council we have the community colleges, we have some of the businesses, some entrepreneurs and tech folks, and but one of the things is when some of the companies, to their credit, tried to start internship programs, they couldn't get one person from the high schools to even come to be interns. And so I think that also we need to do better job, different job in explaining what manufacturing and advanced manufacturing really is. And it seems to me we even need to start at a younger age in, 7th grade and 8th grade to get students more involved, because if they're not involved, it doesn't matter what we offer, they're not going to take the subject up anyway. And I was just wondering what you thought about that, how early we need to start. And I'm really trying to push for some of my businesses to actually adopt schools or adopt programs. Navistar did it in one of my schools, and it has worked out fantastically.
I'll make one observation quickly, which is that you are right that there's been, I think the federal government has had a strong interest in STEM, but it has been a STEM definition that presumes postgraduate studies. So it defaults to the training of engineers and PhDs, which are critical, but we have neglected, and we did a recent accounting of federal programs on this. There's been a neglect of sub-baccalaureate STEM, which the so-called middle skill STEM workforce, which is what GM needs in Tennessee. So there's this huge breakdown for the advanced manufacturing agenda that our cultural focus and the programmatic focus has been towards postgraduate and PhD. So I think there needs to be some kind of balancing at the federal level.
My wife is a children's librarian, and she has science programs that she's organized for 3- and 4-year-olds. They do paper chromatography. She has a section on optics and lasers, and the excitement of those children is just phenomenal, even at that age level. You just can't start too early. A large part of it is the attitude and value system established by the president and by you. I remember the excitement as I was growing up about the space program, and that came from here, from Washington, from the president. And if we can establish that as a culture, I think the educational system and the students will just flow into it. I think it will take some programs. It will take some intelligent legislation. But I think a lot of it is just changing the culture and attitude, and that leadership, I think, is now coming from you with these bills and coming from the president, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, there's no question. If you don't hit them in K to 12, or I would actually argue in K to 8, we've lost them. And we watch other countries where that isn't occurring. At the same time, there are programs that just need to be expanded. First, I don't know if you've ever been to a FIRST Robotics or a Math Counts competition. It's like going to the football game in terms of the excitement there, but look at the number of children that are in those events versus the sports events versus some of the others. So to the extent, culture change, in this country doesn't happen by an edict from above. It happens by catalyzing grassroots events. And so again, find a way to have the federal government expand those things, because we are having trouble. Well, now I'm at the university, so I guess I'm part of the supply chain problem. But the reality is we have to go overseas to import our engineers. We have to turn that around.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank all the witnesses and the members for their questions. And I think, I'm on the Education and Workforce Committee also, and so we talk about this issue. In fact, Ranking Member Lipinski and I were just talking about exactly what, Ms. Kelly, about what you were talking about literally seconds before you made your comment. And it's critical that we start at a young age and get people interested in these fields. I've got 4 kids, and I'm working on it. But thanks for the really valuable testimony, and the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from the members. At this point, the witnesses are excused and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.